The laughter cut deeper than any bullet wound. "Is this some kind of joke?" Major Harrington's voice carried across the shooting range, deliberately loud enough for everyone to hear. "They're sending us a fashion model to train with the Barrett?" Specialist Sarah Collins stood at the edge of the Fort Benning long-range facility, her 5'4" frame seemingly swallowed by the morning shadows. The heavy rifle case at her side looked comically oversized against her slender build. "I think she took a wrong turn at makeup school," someone muttered, triggering another wave of snickers from the cluster of men. Sarah's face remained impassive, betraying nothing. Only the slight whitening of her knuckles on the handle of her case revealed the wound beneath her calm exterior. The men, 16 of them, all elite snipers with multiple deployments, exchanged glances of disbelief tinged with amusement. Women weren't unheard of in the program, but this one, with her delicate features and soft-spoken manner? "Well, Specialist," Harrington emphasized the rank with unmistakable sarcasm. "Since you're here, let's not waste everyone's time. The course record is 3.2 kilometers. Think you can handle half that?" Sarah finally spoke, her voice quiet but oddly clear in the morning air. "I'd like to attempt the full course, sir." The laughter erupted again, harder this time. One man doubled over, slapping his knee. 17 minutes later, not a single person on that range was laughing. Have you ever felt the weight of everyone expecting you to fail? The Fort Benning Long-Distance Marksmanship Challenge was legendary among military circles. A brutal combination of wind variables, extreme distances, and psychological pressure had broken even decorated combat veterans. Of the last 43 participants, only 7 had completed the full course. None were women. "Listen up," Instructor Sergeant Maxwell addressed the group as they gathered at the first station. "Today's challenge has 5 stages, increasing in distance and difficulty. You'll each get 3 attempts per stage. Miss all 3, you're done." His eyes lingered on Sarah for a beat longer than the others. "Anyone want to place some bets?" a voice murmured behind her. 20 says she doesn't clear stage 1. 50 says she breaks down crying. Sarah methodically unpacked her case, revealing a standard issue M110 SAS, the semi-automatic sniper system. Nothing fancy, nothing custom. The men watched, some with open smirks, others with confused frowns. "That's your weapon of choice, Barbie?" a burly specialist named Rodriguez called out. "You do know what range we're shooting today, right?" She nodded once, checking her scope with practiced movements. "Ever fired one of these before?" Harrington asked, his tone suggesting he already knew the answer. "A few times, sir." This triggered another round of barely concealed laughter. Stage 1, 800 meters. A warm-up for this group. The men went first, each hitting the target with textbook precision. When Sarah's turn came, a strange hush fell over the range. Everyone wanted to witness the inevitable embarrassment. She settled into position, her movements neither rushed nor hesitant. Breath in, breath out, stillness. The crack of her rifle split the air. A miss. Wide right. "Wind's tricky today," she commented quietly, adjusting her scope. Snickers rippled through the group. "Yeah, must be the wind," someone mocked. Sarah took her second shot. Another miss, this time left. The men didn't even bother hiding their amusement now. Harrington shook his head, already turning away, clearly considering the exercise finished. "Last shot, Specialist. Make it count," Maxwell said, his voice neutral, but eyes already showing pity. Sarah shifted slightly, her focus absolute. Something in her posture changed, almost imperceptibly. In that moment, would you have given up or shown your true self? The third shot punched through the exact center of the target. Not a lucky hit. Perfect. Textbook. Undeniable. The laughter stopped. "Beginner's luck," Rodriguez muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. Stage 2, 1,400 meters. The real test began here. As they moved to the next position, Sarah caught snippets of whispered conversations. "Probably just nervous on the first shots. Still got lucky. No way she makes the next one." The technical challenges mounted exponentially with distance. Wind drift calculations became complex equations. Bullet drop required precise adjustment. The margin for error shrank to millimeters. At this distance, humidity affected trajectory. Barometric pressure became a factor. The curvature of the Earth itself demanded compensation. Sarah set up her position again, her movements still unrushed. The same standard issue rifle, the same quiet focus. But now the men watched more carefully. The mockery remained in their eyes, but a shadow of doubt had crept in. As she prepared to fire, someone noticed something odd about her equipment. "She's not using a wind meter," Specialist Jackson observed with disbelief. Indeed, the small electronic device that measured wind speed, considered essential equipment, remained untouched in Sarah's kit. "You've forgotten how to use that thing?" Harrington asked, pointing to the meter. "I prefer to read the wind naturally, sir." This statement, delivered without bravado, somehow cut through the arrogance of the group. A ripple of unease spread among the men. That's when Rodriguez noticed something else. A small patch, partially hidden beneath the collar of her uniform. He couldn't make out the insignia, but it wasn't standard issue for her unit. Sarah's first shot at 1,400 meters struck true, as did her second, and her third. No adjustments, no hesitation. A crease appeared between Harrington's eyebrows. "Lucky conditions," he said, but his voice had lost its edge. Stage 3, 2,100 meters. This was where half the qualifiers typically washed out. The distance stretched before them, the targets now barely visible dots on the horizon. At this range, even breathing incorrectly could throw off a shot. "Want to switch to a better rifle now?" Maxwell asked Sarah, his tone no longer condescending, but genuinely curious. She shook her head. "This one will do, Sergeant." For the first time, Sarah closed her eyes before taking position. A memory seemed to pass across her features, something painful, something private, the ghost of an old wound. Have you ever carried a scar that became your strength? At 2,100 meters, the world narrows to a pinpoint. External distractions fade away. The scope becomes your entire universe. Sarah settled in behind her rifle. Her breathing changed, becoming so shallow it was barely perceptible. The transformation was subtle, but complete. Gone was any trace of uncertainty. Gone was the woman they had laughed at just hours before. In her place lay a predator, patient, calculating, absolute. Her first shot at stage 3 struck with unerring precision. The second followed with identical placement. The third completed a triangle pattern so tight that Maxwell needed his binoculars to confirm 3 separate hits. Silence replaced the earlier mockery. The men watched now with uncomfortable attention, their earlier certainty evaporating with each impossible shot. "Who the hell is she?" Jackson whispered to Rodriguez. "I don't know, but that's not a standard shooting technique," Rodriguez replied, his voice low. "That's something else." After completing stage 3, Sarah reached into her pocket and withdrew a worn leather shooting glove. The material was cracked and darkened with age and use. She slipped it onto her right hand with an almost reverential care. "That glove has seen some action," Maxwell observed. Sarah nodded. "It belonged to my instructor. Must have been one hell of a teacher." "She was," Sarah replied simply. The word registered immediately. She. A new kind of discomfort spread through the group of men. Not just the realization they had underestimated her, but something deeper, the recognition that their entire worldview might be flawed. Stage 4, 2,800 meters. Only 3 men in the group had ever completed this stage successfully. "What do you think, gentlemen?" Harrington addressed his men, his tone now professional, previous mockery abandoned. "Think our specialist here can handle this distance with that stock rifle?" No one answered. No one dared predict anything about Sarah Collins anymore. Sarah again closed her eyes before taking position. Her lips moved silently, as if in prayer or mantra. Then came the ritual that would soon become her trademark. Absolute stillness, complete silence, perfect focus. When she fired, the sound seemed to carry a different quality than before, sharper, more decisive. The hit was perfect. Have you ever felt the moment when doubt transforms into certainty? "This is impossible," Rodriguez stated flatly after Sarah completed stage 4 with 3 consecutive hits. "Nobody shoots like this with standard issue. Nobody." The group had fragmented from a unified wall of mockery into isolated islands of confusion. Some watched Sarah with newfound respect. Others seemed almost angry at her success, as if she were somehow cheating them of their superiority. Harrington's face had transformed most dramatically. The contempt had vanished, replaced by intense scrutiny. He watched Sarah with the focus of a man reassessing everything he thought he knew. "Specialist Collins," he said finally. "May I see your service record?" "That would be in my personnel file, sir," she answered, still focused on maintaining her rifle. "I'm aware of that," he said, impatience bleeding through. "I'm asking where you trained." "Fort Bragg initially, then various locations." Her vagueness was deliberate. Everyone felt it. Maxwell approached with a bottle of water, offering it to her with a gesture that contained an unspoken apology. "Staying hydrated is crucial at these distances," he said, his tone now that of a colleague rather than a superior. Sarah accepted with a nod of thanks. "The patch," Rodriguez said suddenly, gesturing to her collar. "That's from Ghost Division, isn't it?" The silence that followed was heavy with implication. Ghost Division wasn't officially acknowledged in any military documentation. It existed in whispers and rumors, an experimental long-range specialist unit that had operated in terrain too hostile for conventional deployment. Sarah neither confirmed nor denied. Her silence was answer enough. "Jesus," someone whispered. "Why are you here?" Harrington asked, his question stripped of all pretense. "Why this charade?" For the first time, a hint of emotion crossed Sarah's face. Not anger, but something like disappointment. "This wasn't a charade, sir. This was a demonstration." A demonstration of what, exactly? Of why assumptions are dangerous. She looked around at the group, meeting each man's eyes in turn. 3 women have applied to this program in the past year. All were rejected before reaching the range. The implication hung in the air like a physical presence. "Stage 5, Maxwell announced, breaking the uncomfortable silence. 4,200 meters. This wasn't just beyond the course record. This approached the edge of documented long-distance shooting. At this range, a heartbeat could throw off a shot by meters. To everyone's surprise, Sarah finally opened her rifle case completely, revealing a hidden compartment. From it, she withdrew a custom scope with specialized markings. "Now we see the real equipment," Rodriguez murmured, a hint of his earlier skepticism returning. But Sarah corrected him quietly. "The equipment was never the point, Specialist Rodriguez. It never is. When someone doubts your essence, do you argue or simply prove them wrong?" Stage 5 stood as a monument to impossibility. At 4,200 meters, over 2.5 miles, factors beyond human control dominated. The rotation of the Earth, the subtle vibrations from distant highway traffic, the thermal signatures rising from the ground. "No one has completed Stage 5 in the history of this course," Maxwell informed the group. "The record is 1 hit out of 3 attempts, set by Master Sergeant Calhoun 3 years ago." All eyes turned to a tall, weathered man at the back of the group who nodded in silent acknowledgement. "Today's conditions are suboptimal," Maxwell continued. "Wind gusting to 12 knots, variable direction, humidity at 68%, barometric pressure falling. In other words, impossible conditions." Sarah made her first equipment change of the day, swapping out her standard issue rifle for a custom Macmillan TAC 338 from the bottom of her case. "I thought that might be in there," Harrington commented. "Some jobs require specialized tools," she replied, her voice still carrying that same quiet certainty. As she prepared her position, a new complication arose. Dark clouds had been gathering all morning, and now the first drops of rain began to fall. "We should postpone," Maxwell suggested, looking at the darkening sky. "May I make my attempts first, Sergeant?" Sarah asked. "I don't mind the rain." Something in her voice, an eagerness perhaps, or a hunger, made him nod in agreement. Sarah took longer to set up for this stage. Each adjustment was minute, precise. She checked and rechecked her calculations. The rain began to fall harder, forming small rivulets on her scope. The men had unconsciously drawn closer together, all previous animosity forgotten in the face of what they were about to witness, either a spectacular failure or something they would talk about for the rest of their careers. 5-minute warning, Maxwell announced, checking his watch. Range is cleared to 4,500 meters. Sarah removed the worn leather glove, kissed it once, and replaced it on her hand. Then she assumed her position. The transformation was complete now. Nothing remained of the uncertain specialist they had mocked hours earlier. In her place lay a weapon system made of flesh and focus. a living calculation of physics and will. The rain fell harder. The wind gusted unpredictably. The world seemed to hold its breath. In the silence before her first shot at an impossible distance, Sarah's mind traveled back. Not to her classified missions with Ghost Division, not to her specialized training. Back to her first day at Fort Bragg, 6 years earlier. The wound was still fresh then, the mockery sharper, the barriers higher. "You'll wash out in a week," her drill sergeant had told her, not with malice, but with what he perceived as kindness. "This isn't a place for—" He hadn't finished the sentence. He hadn't needed to. The meaning was clear in his eyes. Not a place for women. She had survived that week, and the next, and the months that followed. Each day, she carried the weight of proving herself. Each shot required perfection, where male counterparts were granted margin for error. Each success was dismissed as an exception. The burden had been crushing until she met Captain Rebecca Torres, the first female instructor in the Advanced Marksmanship program, the woman who would become her mentor, her advocate, and eventually her friend. "You'll never change their minds with words," Torres had told her. "Only with results so undeniable they can't be dismissed." Torres had given her the leather glove on her final day of training. "This carried me through 3 deployments," she had said. "Now it will carry you." 3 months later, Torres was killed by an IED in Afghanistan. The rain continued to fall as Sarah prepared her first shot at 4,200 meters. The distance seemed to stretch into infinity. The target was no longer visible to the naked eye, hidden by rain and distance. But Sarah wasn't aiming with her eyes anymore. She was aiming with the accumulated weight of every dismissal, every underestimation, every barrier placed in her way, and in the way of every woman who had come before her. She was aiming with Torres' memory, with her glove, with her legacy. The shot, when it came, was not just a bullet leaving a barrel. It was a statement written in gunpowder and precision. The sound echoed across the range, somehow different from all the shots that had preceded it. Fuller, deeper, final. Through driving rain, Maxwell raised his binoculars, focusing on the distant target. His voice, when it finally came, was barely audible. "Hit. Perfect center. What memory drives you when all odds stand against you?" The rain intensified, driven sideways by gusting wind. Visibility deteriorated by the second. The conditions had moved beyond challenging to nearly impossible. Even with confirmed success on her first shot, Sarah showed no emotion, no celebration, no acknowledgement of the extraordinary feat she had just accomplished. Instead, she methodically adjusted her scope, compensating for the changing weather conditions. The ritual began again. Breath control, absolute stillness, complete focus. "Wind shift," Maxwell called out, now coming from the west at 14 knots. This was a significant change, one that would alter bullet trajectory dramatically at such an extreme distance. Most shooters would need to recalculate entirely, perhaps even postpone their attempt. Sarah made a single, minute adjustment to her scope, her movements economical and precise. The second shot cracked across the range. Through sheets of rain, Maxwell again raised his binoculars. Seconds stretched into an eternity as he tried to locate the impact point in the deteriorating visibility. "Hit," he finally confirmed. 2 inches right of center. Murmurs rippled through the group of men, no longer containing any trace of skepticism or mockery. Now they held only disbelief tinged with respect. "That's not possible," Calhoun stated flatly. "Not in these conditions. Not at this distance." "What are we witnessing here?" Rodriguez asked quietly, the question seemingly directed at no one in particular. "Excellence," Harrington answered, his voice altered by a newfound humility. "Pure excellence." The rain now fell in torrents, reducing visibility to less than 100 meters. Lightning flashed in the distance. "We should call it," Maxwell decided. "Conditions are becoming dangerous." "One more shot," Sarah requested, her voice carrying that same quiet certainty. "Please." Something in her tone, an intensity that bordered on necessity, made Maxwell nod his agreement. "Final attempt authorized," he confirmed. "Make it quick, specialist. That lightning is getting closer." Sarah settled in for her third attempt at an impossible distance under impossible conditions. But now, A new factor entered the equation, the unpredictable flashes of lightning temporarily blinding anyone looking through optics. She would have to time her shot perfectly between flashes, while accounting for wind, rain, distance, and all the other countless variables. The men watched in silence, witnesses to something they had never expected to see. Have you ever stood at the edge of the impossible and decided to step forward anyway? As Sarah prepared for her final shot, Harrington stepped closer to Rodriguez, speaking in a low voice that barely carried over the rain. "I made some calls," he said. "About Ghost Division." Rodriguez waited, his attention split between Sarah and his superior. It was deactivated 3 years ago after a classified operation in the Hindu Kush. Only 3 operators survived. Lightning flashed again, briefly illuminating Sarah's face, her features set in absolute concentration. "She's one of them," Rodriguez realized aloud. Harrington nodded. The file said she hit a confirmed target at 3,800 meters, in a snowstorm, to extract her team. The information rippled through the group, changing the atmosphere from respect to something approaching awe. They weren't watching a woman proving herself anymore. They were watching a legend being born. Lightning flashed again, closer this time. Thunder followed almost immediately. "Last attempt," Maxwell called. "Then we clear the range." Sarah made no acknowledgement. She had entered that space beyond conscious thought, where instinct and training merge into something transcendent. The ritualistic silence descended one final time. Complete stillness, perfect focus, absolute certainty. Between lightning flashes, in a momentary lull in the rain, Sarah took her shot. The crack of the rifle was immediately swallowed by a massive thunderclap, as if nature itself were responding to her defiance of its limitations. Through the downpour, Maxwell strained with his binoculars. Seconds passed. The group waited in suspended animation. Finally, Maxwell lowered the binoculars. His expression was unreadable. "Hit," he announced. "Perfect center. 3 shots, 3 hits, at 4,200 meters, in a thunderstorm." No one spoke. What words could possibly follow such a demonstration? As Sarah methodically broke down her rifle, her movements precise despite the driving rain, Harrington approached her. "Specialist Collins," he said, his voice carrying a formality that acknowledged a fundamental shift in their relationship. "I owe you an apology." Sarah looked up, rain streaming down her face. "No, sir," she replied. "You owe an apology to every woman who never got this far because of assumptions." The truth in her words struck deeper than any bullet. When was the last time you had to completely reconsider what you thought was possible? The storm passed as quickly as it had arrived, leaving behind a transformed landscape and a transformed group of men. As they gathered their equipment, preparing to return to base, the earlier camaraderie had been replaced by a subdued reverence. Occasionally, one would glance at Sarah, as if still trying to reconcile the woman who had arrived that morning with the legend who would depart. 3 hits at 4,200 meters. Rodriguez shook his head in disbelief. "That's a world record, by a significant margin." "Will they make it official?" Jackson asked. Maxwell joined the conversation. "That would require acknowledging Ghost Division operations. So no, officially this never happened." The injustice of this statement hung in the air. Sarah continued packing her equipment, seemingly unconcerned with records or recognition. The worn leather glove, her talisman, was carefully folded and placed back in her pocket. As the group prepared to depart, Calhoun approached her. As the previous record holder, his acknowledgement carried special weight. "That last shot," he said, professional curiosity overcoming his reticence. "How did you compensate for the wind shift? It was gusting unpredictably." "I didn't aim for where the target was," Sarah replied. "I aimed for where I needed the bullet to be when the target and the round intersected." The simplicity of her explanation belied the extraordinary calculation behind it. She wasn't just compensating for variables. She was thinking in 4 dimensions, integrating time itself into her equations. "Will you be instructing here?" Rodriguez asked. Sarah closed her rifle case with a decisive click. "That's not my decision." All eyes turned to Harrington. The question hung unspoken in the air. The major studied Sarah for a long moment, his internal struggle visible on his features. Finally, his professional judgment overcame his personal biases. "I'll be submitting a formal recommendation that Specialist Collins be considered for an instructor position, he announced. Effective immediately. A weight seemed to lift from the group, the unburdening that comes with justice served, however belatedly. There's something else you should know, Sarah said, addressing the group. I wasn't sent here randomly. I requested this assignment specifically. Why? Maxwell asked. Because I heard about the women who were rejected without evaluation, and because change doesn't happen on its own. Her gaze swept across the men, settling finally on Harrington. It happens one shot at a time. The metaphor was lost on no one. When did you realize that your purpose was larger than your personal achievement? The return to base carried none of the easy banter that had marked their departure that morning. The group moved in reverent silence, each man lost in his own thoughts, reevaluating certainties they had held unquestioned for years. As they approached the command building, an unexpected figure waited on the steps. Colonel Harrison, base commander, stood with his arms crossed, watching their approach with evident curiosity. Major Harrington, he called out, I received reports of some extraordinary shooting at the long-range facility. Care to elaborate? The group parted instinctively, leaving Sarah standing alone in clear view of the colonel. Harrington stepped forward. This was the moment of truth, when words would either align with actions or betray them. Sir, he began, his voice carrying across the parade ground with unusual clarity. Specialist Collins has just set a new course record. 3 confirmed hits at 4,200 meters in adverse weather conditions. The colonel's eyebrows rose in genuine surprise. Is that so? Yes, sir. I witnessed it personally, as did every man here. The colonel studied Sarah with new interest. That's over a mile beyond the previous record, Major. Yes, sir. 2.61 miles, to be precise. A heavy silence fell as the colonel processed this information. His next words would signal either acceptance of this new reality or rejection of evidence in favor of entrenched bias. And your recommendation, Major? Harrington stood straighter, his voice taking on a formal tone. I recommend Specialist Collins for immediate consideration as an advanced marksmanship instructor, sir. Her skills are unparalleled. The word hung in the air, a complete reversal of the dismissive assessment he had offered mere hours earlier. The colonel descended the steps, approaching Sarah directly. Specialist Collins, he addressed her. Would you be willing to accept such an assignment? The question carried weight beyond the immediate circumstance. It represented opportunity, not just for Sarah, but for every woman who would follow. Sarah's response came without hesitation, her voice quiet but carrying that same unmistakable certainty. On one condition, sir. The colonel waited, his expression neutral. That all applicants be evaluated based on their performance, not their gender. A flicker of something, perhaps recognition, perhaps respect, crossed the colonel's features. That seems like a reasonable condition, Specialist. The moment stretched, charged with significance. Then, with deliberate formality, the colonel extended his hand. Welcome to the instructor cadre, Collins. As they shook hands, sealing the agreement, Sarah's composure finally softened. For the first time that day, she allowed herself a small smile. The ritual was complete. The wound acknowledged. The silence broken. The shot taken. The respect earned. Have you ever witnessed the exact moment when the world changes? The story of Specialist Sarah Collins spread through Fort Benning like wildfire. By evening mess, the details had been embellished, the distances exaggerated, the weather conditions made even more dramatic. But the essential truth remained unaltered. A barrier had fallen that day. A ceiling had been shattered with the precision of a perfectly placed shot. 2 weeks later, 3 new female applicants arrived for the advanced marksmanship program. The following month, 7 more. By year's end, 22 women had entered a program that had previously accepted only 3 in its entire history. None faced the mockery that Sarah had endured. The path, once blazed, remained open. On a crisp autumn morning, 6 months after her historic demonstration, Sarah stood at the same range, now as an instructor. A group of trainees, men and women alike, listened attentively as she explained the fundamentals of extreme long-distance shooting. Precision isn't about strength, she told them, her quiet voice carrying across the attentive group. It's about consistency, patience, and the willingness to calculate every variable. Among her students was Rodriguez, who had requested additional training under her specifically. The most important shot you'll ever take, Sarah continued, isn't the one that travels the furthest distance. It's the one that carries the most meaning. As the trainees dispersed to their positions, Rodriguez approached her. "I wanted to thank you," he said, the previous cockiness replaced by genuine humility. "Not just for the training, but for the lesson." Sarah nodded in acknowledgement. "The hardest targets aren't downrange, Rodriguez. They're in here." She tapped her temple lightly. "The barriers we place in our own minds." Later that day, as the sun began its descent, Harrington found Sarah at the range office, reviewing student evaluations. "You've transformed this program," he said without preamble. "Retention rates up 40%, qualification scores improved across the board." Sarah accepted the observation with characteristic understatement. "Good shooters come in all forms, sir. We just needed to let them in." Harrington nodded, the lesson fully internalized. "I've recommended you for promotion to sergeant, effective next month. The colonel has already approved." "Thank you, sir." As he turned to leave, Harrington paused. "Collins, what you did that day, it wasn't just about proving yourself, was it?" Sarah's eyes met his, unwavering. "No, sir. It was about changing the story. For all of us." The truth of her words resonated beyond the immediate conversation, beyond the program, beyond the base, perhaps beyond the military itself. Some shots change trajectories. Some change records. The most important ones change minds. What invisible barrier are you ready to shatter today? Respect isn't determined by gender. It's earned through merit. If this story resonated with you, remember that each of us faces our own impossible targets. Each of us has the power to change perceptions, one perfect shot at a time. Subscribe for more stories of extraordinary courage and unexpected excellence in She Took the Shot. What glass ceiling will we watch shatter next week?